I'm Margaret Lowe. I'm WBUR CEO, and welcome to CitySpace, both virtually in the room. There is nothing better than a full house. So it's wonderful to see you all. And I think tonight is going to be a delicious evening. Before I introduce our special guest, I just want to say a few things about WBUR. And we think about the job that we're here to do every day. And it all begins with our mission, really, which is to produce high-quality journalism and enriching experiences that deepen understanding, connection, and community for an expanding circle of people. And every single day, we try to produce journalism that is hard-hitting and original with an occasional dash of surprise and delight. And I think there's going to be a heavy dose of surprise and delight tonight. I happen to love to cook, and I love to eat. And I think of food as one of life's few reliable pleasures. And so I couldn't wait for tonight, this edition of Curated Cuisine. Eric Ripert, who all of you clearly know, is a chef extraordinaire. He's owner of Le Bernardin, and boy, did I feel nervous about saying that out loud in front of him. It is one of 5 restaurants in New York City with 3 Michelin stars. He's the author of many cookbooks, including the one we're going to talk about tonight, Seafood Simple. We're going to learn how to poach and grill and fillet and shuck. And we're going to hear the incredible story about how the chef became the celebrated person that he is today. And that's not all. You're also in for a special treat after the show. Our wonderful partners, BU Food and Wine, have prepared the chef's fish soup with tomato, fennel, and saffron for you to taste. So we'll just get your hunger ready. There is so much to look forward to, so I think it's time for us to roll, and it gives me enormous pleasure to welcome to the stage the co-host of Here and Now, WBUR's Robin Young, one and only extraordinaire, and here with Chef Eric Ripert.
No, keep applauding while I arrange myself. Here. Yes.
Thank you.
I need one of those luggage carts to come out. What a pleasure for me, too, to sit here and just gaze at you.
Don't make me blush already. We're just starting.
But also to have this book, which is, how many people have it? The book. Oh, with you. Okay, so obviously already you've had fans, and I was looking around and said, how can I appropriately add to what Margaret's going to say? And then I found it in the Village Voice. Here's what they said about you, and I pictured this New York accent. The man thinks, breathes, and sleeps with the fishes. Obsessed like Ahab. He can cook nothing else. He's one of the world's best seafood chefs, and New York is lucky to have him. So are we, Eric Ripert.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
So I want to get a little of the origin story. This will come as a shock to many, but you were born in France.
Yes. I don't have an accent, but I was born in France. Yeah.
Sadly, Dad died when you were 11. Stepdad, you've spoken of this, very abusive. I think you told the New York Times he was a parasite. And you encouraged your mom to kick him out. This is part of the story. But you also speak of a mom who cooked elegant meals. It was a place where people gathered. So take that whole upbringing and where did you put that? How is that in the you we meet today?
Oof. Well, I was very lucky. I had 2 grandmothers, one from Provence, one from Italy, cooking soul food from their own culture. And on the weekend, I will go and, depending on the weekend, be with one or the other and have this fantastic, great food. And then my mother was obsessed with fine dining, and at the time, nouvelle cuisine, and in the 70s, when I was 5-6 years old, she would be inspired by Paul Bocuse and a generation of chefs that were coming up in France. And at home, I will eat lunch and dinner with a different tablecloth, different china pattern. They had a different wine. I couldn't drink the wine, but different wine on the table. And my mother would cook appetizer, main course, and dessert for lunch and dinner. And it will be different every lunch and dinner, every day of the week.
Yeah.
And I thought every kid in the world was eating. I was like, I mean...
Oh. Let's just turn that off. You're not answering the
Do you have a question?
question.
I was eating the best food from my grandmothers and then my mother, and I had the passion for eating and for being in a kitchen. But 5 years old in a kitchen or 6 years old in a kitchen is not very practical. So I could only watch and eat. They didn't want me to touch anything. So I was not allowed to touch.
Well, you could get hurt, actually.
Well, they didn't want to clean after me.
Oh, I see.
That's why. But I developed that passion for eating and cooking at a very young age. And even when times were difficult at home, you mentioned that my stepfather was not really a good friend of mine. But when we were eating lunch and dinner, it was peace. We made peace, and it was very civilized until the end. And then we were starting the war again.
Well, food meant peace.
Yes.
And civility.
I strongly believe that.
Yeah, well, no surprise then that you go to culinary boarding school at 15,
Yes.
then work at one of the most storied restaurants in Paris, Le Tour d'Argent.
Yes.
Another, Jamin?
Jamais.
With Chef Joël Robuchon. You went right to the top in Paris.
Yes. So I went at 15 to culinary school because I was a bad student. And I was a bad student because instead of studying, I was reading cookbooks at night. So I couldn't have good grades. And at 15, the principal called me in office with my mom and said, look, the kid cannot go further. We have to find a vocational school. And I was like, yeah, culinary school. I'm going to culinary school, which I did.
Yeah.
And then when I graduated from culinary school, finally I was a good student. And when I graduated, I grabbed the Michelin guide, which was at the time in France the most important source for knowing about good restaurants. And it was 18 three-star Michelin, which is the highest ranking. And I wrote a letter to the 18 three-star restaurant. And I said, yeah, I'm Eric Ripert. I'm 17 years old. I just graduated. I want to come to your restaurant. Nobody answered. And then 2 months later, I received a letter from La Tour d'Argent in Paris. And they said, yeah, we may have something for you. Call us at this number. So I called. And I had a discussion with the chef. And at the end, I said, when do I start? He said, tomorrow. I was living 1,000 miles from Paris. So I packed and went to Paris on my own and started in La Tour d'Argent in 1982. They were celebrating at that time their 400-year anniversary. It was something really special.
And then on to Chef Robuchon. Is it true that part of your job there was to make a meal for his dog every night?
Not quite,
No.
but
Okay. But that's a good story,
no.
you know?
But Joël Robuchon was considered one of the best chefs in Europe, in France, in the world, in the galaxy, anywhere you want. And he had a dog, a French poodle. And every day we were feeding the dog. And Mr. Robuchon, we call him Mr. Robuchon, or Chef Robuchon, was eating at home for dinner. So every day we were preparing the food for the dog. And it was a turn in between the cooks to prepare the meal of the dog. But the dog will never finish his meal. So we will receive a call from his house saying that we sabotaged the dinner of the dog. And that the meat was cut too small or too big, or it was always something about the dog. Yes.
Well, better that than that's how he reviewed your restaurant meals, if you got to make any of those.
Yes.
Maybe he did that too. We're going to talk about how chefs treat staff in a second, but going along in the story, at 24, you come to the U.S. By the way, when you were talking about, I adored my mom, but I grew up in the 50s and 60s on Long Island. We've talked about this in New York. And I had tuna casseroles and, Jell-O mold worked its way in. We had a lot of fresh fish because we went crabbing and, not crabbing, clamming and stuff like that. But so I'm thinking of what I had growing up and what you had. Why did you come to the U.S.?
That's a good question. Actually, I wanted to go to Brazil. So I was at Joël Robuchon, and I went to see him, and I gave him my notice. And he didn't like when you will give your notice. So I gave him 6 months notice for him to digest the news. And I asked him if he could help me to find a job in Brazil. And he said he was not sending me in vacation. And then he said, find another country. So I said, I would like to go to Spain. But I grew up in Andorra, which is a very small country in between France and Spain, where we speak Catalan and Spanish and French. And he said, but it's too much like your house. So finally I said, well, why don't you choose the country and you tell me where you want me to go and I'll just show up. So he said, go in vacation. When you come back from your vacation, I will tell you where to go. And he sent me to Washington, D.C.
Where you meet and work with the extraordinary Jean-Louis Palladin.
Yes.
I don't want to insert myself here, but I need to sort of disclose that you would not know this, and I don't expect anyone to know this, but I hosted the first show on the Food Channel, and it was called Ready, Set, Cook.
Yes,
Oh.
of course.
You know it.
I went on that show.
I think you did. I say, okay, so I did it in 1996, and it was a cooking game show, and they would have 2 James Beard award-winning chefs come in and get a bag of food, and you had a certain amount of time to come up with the best recipe, and I would run back and forth between them to see how they were each doing. And my favorite of all time, and it turned into just a beautiful friendship, was Jean-Louis Palladin and Michel Richard.
Oh, yes.
Came, just extraordinary chefs, and we would tape 5 shows every afternoon. We were in New York at the Chelsea Pier, taping, and my news friends were saying, "Why are you doing this?" And I'd say, "Why not? You're out of your mind to meet these extraordinary people." Well, we would tape 5 shows a day, and both Michel Richard and Jean-Louis would start drinking at the beginning. And by the 5th show, they were only speaking French. And as you know, I can say, où est la bibliothèque, where's the library from high school French, but I would have to kind of be speaking for them through this whole taping.
You were translating.
That's right. But talk about how extraordinary this experience must have been to work with Jean-Louis.
Jean-Louis Palladin was amazing, very, very creative. He was at the Watergate Hotel, famous for something else, but famous also for his cooking, because he was an exceptional chef and cook, extremely creative. He was, I think, the youngest chef in France before he left to get 2 stars in a Michelin guide, which was like a big deal. And then he came to the US and became very famous in our industry and very famous in Washington, D.C. Working for Joël Robuchon was extremely difficult because it was like a military organization, extremely rigid. And then Jean-Louis Palladin was very creative. And if I can make an analogy, it's like going from Catholic school to Woodstock, right? Something like that. But from being in that very rigid environment where actually I learned discipline and techniques and so on, suddenly I was with Jean-Louis, who was extremely creative and gave me the opportunity to basically free myself from the dictatorship of Joël Robuchon and just start to express myself.
Well, he was such a lovely man, and I love to see that you had that connection. And the other thing that I was so privileged to have in this experience was every night after taping those 5 shows, and perhaps we did this together, I don't know, we would go out with the friends of the chef who are now, they'd be closing their restaurants, and we'd have Jean-Georges
Van Gerichten.
Yeah,
Yes.
we'd go there, and you know the restaurants closed, and they would bring out the sauterne and the pâté, and these chefs would, all these dear friends would sit around. Talk about the community of chefs.
The community of chefs, I think it's worldwide. It's not only in New York or in America, but I'm sure it's in Boston. I mean, I know it is in Boston as well. Chefs are, first of all, we are in hospitality industry, and we want to make people happy. And also, we are very close because it's a very small world. Yes, we compete, but it's a very friendly competition. At the end of the day, we have this solidarity in between us. And anywhere I go, when I see chefs, right away, it's friendship that is developing very quickly. And it's very simple also. When you sit down at a table and you share a meal with someone, suddenly something happens, something magical happens, a certain intimacy happens, you share something, you connect. That's the power of eating together, and especially if you are cooking together, it's even more powerful. So what that generation of chefs did, still today going on, and even the very new generation that comes into our field as professionals have this tremendous respect for the older guys like me now, and also are very close to each other and help each other.
Yeah. Well, you took from all the different chefs you worked with, and then, of course, Le Bernardin. In 1991, you were working with Chef Gilbert Lecause.
Yes.
So sad. He died unexpectedly at 49. You're 29 at that time when he died? I think 2 years later you...
Yes, I'm 29, yes.
Yeah. Yeah. And he's a mentor. You know, I found myself thinking, your dad dies young, and then here's this mentor also dies young. And it's one of the best restaurants in the world. And 2 years later, you're the co-owner. 31. Terrified?
No.
Oh.
I mean, well, first of all, when Gilbert Lecause passed away, it was very difficult emotionally for me because he was a mentor, he was a dear friend, we were very close. I worked 3 years with him, and he gave me a lot of freedom to express myself. He wanted to have a chef de cuisine that was young, which was me at the time, and said, you know, I give you freedom to do whatever you want, just respect the philosophy of Le Bernardin, and then I will support you forever. So I was in control of his kitchen, and he was thinking about developing other restaurants at the time, and we opened Miami, which was a casual concept. And he was interested by that. He was done with the kitchen, basically. And I was operating the kitchen. I was creative in the kitchen. I was doing basically everything. So when he passed away, technically it was not too much of a big change, except that I missed him tremendously. Mm-hmm. And then we moved on, and I was fearless because I supposedly was a buzz in town that I was too young. I was going to lose the stars. I was going to not maintain the quality. I really didn't care. I was really, really focused and passionate about what I was doing. And it's only what I was thinking about. How can I make the food better today than yesterday? Which is the same today, actually. How can I make it better than yesterday? How can dinner be better than lunch? How can lunch tomorrow can be better than dinner, and so on? And by being focused like that, I totally ignore the buzz and what was going on outside. And I basically got rewarded at the end with a lot of support from our clients, a lot of support from the press, and moved on with Le Bernardin from those years until today.
And have maintained it as one of the best, if not some say the best restaurant in the world. But I want to ask how you might have evolved along the way, because now, you are vocal about your disapproval of abusive chefs.
For
but
sure.
there was a time when you acted through anger a lot. What was that? How did you change that?
So some of my mentors, I won't mention their name necessarily, but some of my mentors were very abusive. And that was the culture in France at the time. When I grew up in the 80s in a kitchen, the chef was glorified as a mini dictator. And anger was glorified as well. And abuse was glorified. And the young generation was going into those kitchens, and we were living in another dimension. We were living 2,000 years ago. We were being verbally abused, physically abused. They were punching us in the shoulders, kicking our butt, sometimes taking us in the coolers, the big fridge, and beating us and things like that. We were insulted the entire day, never a compliment, never anything like that. And it was normal. And also in France at the time, they really believed that philosophy was going to help. So they were taking young people. The idea was to break them psychologically and then rebuild them as champions. And it was the most stupid idea that I ever heard. I mean, we lost so much talent in that process. But anyway, I was conditioned to be angry and to think that I was right, because I was conditioned in those kitchens for years. So when I had my first position of authority in a kitchen, what did I do? I emulate my mentors. And I was throwing tantrums and plates on the floor when the food was not right, and was very verbally abusive, never violent physically. But I thought it was the right thing to do. And in my life, I was miserable. And I knew I was miserable because when I would close my eyes, I could see only ugly things. And if I would say I remember saying to myself after work at night in my sofa at home, try to envision a field of flowers. And I would close my eyes and I would see nothing but ugliness.
Ugliness.
And then the team was leaving and the cooks were miserable. The ones that were staying with me were miserable. And then one night I had this wake up kind of moment. And I said,
Is that French?
I'm no. And I said, I'm wrong. This is not right. We have to change. And when you're young, you want to change immediately. So I came back the day after and I said, hey guys, we're changing everything. I'm so sorry, I apologize. But I had trained sous chefs for years to be abusive.
Yeah.
And then it took me months to retrain them because they were like, you nuts. Yesterday you tell us to be like this, now you change your mind. It took me some time a little bit, but I have to say, a cook who's shaking like this will never do a better job than a cook that focus and joyful and happy and has the potential to blossom. Or any employee actually in a restaurant or anywhere actually. Someone who's not abused, doesn't have the fear, doesn't have the stress, will always do better for himself and for the people around him. And if it goes into the food, I guarantee you that the food will be better when you put love instead of fear into your food. But I want to finish.
Into everything.
I'm sorry, I want to finish because I have something to say. And then I see on television some programs now with some chefs that are promoting verbal abuse, stupid attitude. And I'm not going to say, well, I'm going to say his name.
I was.
Right? I mean, Gordon Ramsay.
Yeah.
What is he doing? What does he think he's doing? What is the production company behind him is doing? What is the TV network supporting that? What are they doing?
Ratings?
They're crazy. But it's not the right thing to do. And each time I have an opportunity, I give it to Gordon.
We're going to get, by the way, to the actual cooking that's in the cookbook. But I told you this origin story is so fascinating. But in preparation of that, in a few minutes when we actually talk about the book, if you have questions for Eric, you can go to slido.com, that's SLIDO.com, and put in cuisine, and we'll get to as many of the questions as we can. You're all looking at me like, that is so, I know. It's a do-it-yourself. We already have a lot coming in, so apparently you all know how to do that. So, but I have to ask, Eric Ripert, I see the beads and the bracelet on your arm. I don't know if those are prayer beads, but I wondered how much you're becoming a Buddhist impacted this.
Yes, when I was very, very young. I mean, when I started to come in America, I started to be interested. At the time, I came in 1989. In 1989, the Dalai Lama, the 14th Dalai Lama, got the Peace Nobel Prize. And I happened to read his speech of acceptance, was very inspired by it, and then started to read about Buddhism and Tibet and what was going on there. And study more, and it's a philosophy that really speaks to me. It has helped me to be a better person, to find inner peace, and today I really try to find a secular way to share with my team and the people that are close to me what I have learned. And I do it in a secular way because obviously I'm not trying to change their beliefs and so on.
Yeah.
I'm not converting anyone, that's for sure. But it has been very positive for me.
What do they say? Attraction rather than promotion. So maybe they might be attracted to what you have found. And I am wondering if it helped you in the terrible time, we're going to touch on it, Anthony Bourdain.
Yes. Well, Anthony and I were very good friends, as you know. And the friendship started when he wrote Kitchen Confidential. So that was in 2000 when the book came out. And everybody was speaking about, especially in the industry, about the book because supposedly he was trashing half of the industry and making fun of a lot of them and then glorifying some others. So one day, one friend came to me and said, your name is mentioned in that book many, many times. I was like, oh, God. Wow. So that was forcing me to buy the book and read the book to make sure that he was saying nice things about me, just in case. And he had only compliments. He didn't know me. I never met him. So I grabbed the phone and I called him and I said, hi, I'm Eric Ripert and you wrote nice things about me and why don't we have lunch?
Well.
We got hammered. So we break the ice right away. and then the friendship began and we were very close. Then his career took him away from where he was at the time when he wrote Kitchen Confidential, which was Les Halles, a restaurant called Les Halles. Then he started to travel and do a lot of television, as we know. But when he was back in New York, we were together a lot. And then at one point, he asked me to join him sometimes on his trips to have fun. And it was basically like a paid vacation. and we were having great fun on television, outside the cameras as well. We even had a show called Good and Evil. And I don't tell you who was good and evil because I was not the good one at the end. But we went to 35 cities in the US, in theaters, in real theaters, movie theaters and theaters. And even Las Vegas, I saw my name on the marquee. I was like, oh my God, I made it with Tony. But we were sold out, and it was a show based on improvisation. So we had nothing scripted. We will come on the stage and start to roast each other first. So it was brutal. And I was the first victim, and then it was my turn. And that was the beginning of the show. And we would stay on stage about 2 hours. And people were laughing hysterical, not because of me, because of him and his humor and because he spoke English. And that friendship lasted until the very end.
The very end. And you have sworn, and I think it's admirable that, I mean, you were there at the end, and you and the crew have vowed not to talk about it. And so
Yes.
we're going to honor that, never talk about that. But I just, as you moved on, you know, your own tremendous success, I'm imagining your faith or your practice might have helped. You know, what did you take from him, and how did you turn that corner, this deep friendship? You know, that's tough.
Anthony and I were very different. And I think what made it very attractive to each other is to be so different, but have the same values, universal values about doing the right thing and promoting the right things. Anthony would have hated for me to say love and compassion, and he was like, not about that. But he was practicing love and compassion, and he was, as you have seen him on TV, extremely respectful of other people, of their culture, of everything that was offered to him from the people he was interacting with, which is basically love and compassion. And
I thought of him as almost a minister. You know,
he was an atheist. He didn't believe in anything. And,
No, I know.
And refused to even discuss with me philosophy,
Yeah.
Buddhist philosophy.
But I mean,
made fun of me on TV about that, actually. And
But I mean, in the way that he listened to people and he cared about each one.
yes,
Yeah.
oh yes, of course. He will go in Vietnam, in Libya, in Congo. Will be in the middle of the rainforest and be with someone with no education and nothing to offer except a little bit of food, and sometimes not the freshest food. And by respect, he will connect with them, of course, because he was curious. But by respect, he will eat everything that was given to him. I even made fun of him because once he was with the Bushmen, that was part of actually our show, Good and Evil. He was with the Bushmen shooting an episode, and he was following them for a week, and they didn't have food, and they were finally going through the bushes in South Africa, and finally found how you call it, the wild boar.
On the wild boar.
It was not a wild boar, but the same kind of animal. Warthog.
Sounds
What?
Okay. Warthog.
Yes.
Okay.
That was and therefore they killed it with an arrow, and then it took them a day or two to bring it back to the tribe, and then they have this big banquet, and Anthony is the guest of honor, and the chef. So they clean the animal very poorly. They cook it halfway. They didn't have enough wood. Anthony is the guest of honor. The team of filming, and they're like, "Hey, good luck." And then the chief put his hand in the rear of the animal, clean it, and then take a knife, slice the anus, and give it to Anthony as the best piece of the animal. And Anthony, by respect, and is the guest of honor, is like, I can't say no. I have to take one for the team. And he ate it, and he actually got sick. He ended up in hospital. But I said to him, Anthony, really, at the end of the day, you are with those people, the Bushmen. They have nothing. You come and you're showing off with your cameras and you follow them. And he's giving you the anus of the animal. Have you ever seen any culture in a world that believes that the anus is the best piece of the animal? I had to give it back to him sometime. I mean.
Well, it's so obvious that you carry him with you too. And as you do all these chefs, everyone you've interacted with, everyone you've taken with you for this phenomenal success. So let's talk about that, and let's talk about your love of seafood and how to do it best. And by the way, to start that, where's Kate Smith? Kate Smith, wave your
There.
hand. Why can't I? Oh, she's back there.
Yes.
Kate Smith, whose restaurant is Thistle and Leek in Newton, Massachusetts. Guess where she studied? Le Bernardin with
3 years, right? Yeah,
Chef
congratulations.
Ripert. And I asked, I know you've had a chance to talk, and I asked her, what was that like? What did you learn at Le Bernardin? What did you learn from Eric Ripert? And she said, we didn't follow a recipe. It wasn't about, just following the recipe and getting it right. First of all, the fish is the star on the plate. The seafood is the star. But also, we learned how to cook, which is not following the recipe. We learned how to know for ourselves what the best ingredients were, what it should smell like, what it should taste like. Talk about that.
Yes. I mean, you want the mic? I'm going to do my best. So we have one Le Bernardin, and we have one Le Bernardin and not developed many, many restaurants. And some of my friends have developed 50 restaurants, and I think they will be bored to death if they had one, like me, and I will be dead if I had 50. But I have the mentality of an artisan. I understand business as well, but for me it's very important to have the relationship with the team and one-on-one teach from the knowledge that I have, or the sous chefs, the knowledge that we have accumulated over the years, the cooking wisdom that we have accumulated is very important to share. And you cannot share that by giving a recipe and saying, well, measure everything and read the recipe, you will get it. You have to be with your team and explain the reasons and why one day you put more onions than yesterday, and maybe today the garlic is very pungent, maybe yesterday or last week the garlic was not pungent, maybe that tomato is very ripe, but this one is not ripe. So you have to compensate all the time. When you cook at a very high level, it's very, very important to make those distinctions and to go in a very, very tiny details to create a certain consistency and excellency in what you are doing. So at Le Bernardin, I'm not going to give to the cooks the recipe and say, follow the recipe, take the weight of every ingredient. No, we spend the time with them. We explain why the techniques is the right technique for that species that we are preparing. We share through communication, again, a lot of informations that I believe make the difference. Some restaurateurs that have 50 restaurants, they have no choice than to give them a piece of paper with recipes to make sure that it's kind of the same all the time. But even us as artisans, when we share the knowledge and we train someone, we want to be here and have this level of consistency. We tolerate this, but we don't tolerate that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, the book starts, there's a lot of tips throughout it. Starts with raw fish, cooking with raw fish, which I would be petrified of. Not anymore. I mean, having read this. So the very best fish, you have to make sure it's absolutely the freshest. But let's say you are treating some raw fish with acid, you've got lemon or lime acidity, then you always have to put a little olive oil on it to take that back?
Not necessarily.
Okay, so I learned nothing.
I mean, you can, yes, of course. The point is that if you are preparing raw fish and let's suppose you do a carpaccio or you do a tartare or you do any raw fish preparation, if you bring some acidity into the dish, suddenly you create a contrast that will enhance and elevate the qualities of the fish. So let's suppose you do a tuna carpaccio, you put salt, pepper. Not of course, but you should put salt, pepper.
Can I just jump in? Yeah, can I just jump in for a second to say, which is so easy. You take a meat pounder and a piece of like a salmon and you pound it till it's nice and flat.
Yes, we call it a tuna pounder.
Yes, but go ahead.
But let's say you do a carpaccio, and so you season it properly, and we teach you how to season. Actually, the cover of the book, it's my hand seasoning a piece of fish, and the reason why we're doing that is because a lot of people don't know how to season. Nobody's born with the skills of seasoning, knife skills, and so on. You have to learn, and you don't season bang from here. I know, I love Emeril. He's a dear friend. And you don't season too close because then you don't see what you are doing. You season to a certain distance. And so we're teaching that in a book, actually. But when you have seasoned your raw fish or cooked fish, if you want to enhance the qualities of that fish, acidity will do the trick. So if you put lemon juice, lime juice, vinegar, anything that is acidic, you are going to create that contrast. But if you do it too early, the acidity, especially of lime and lemons, that is very, very strong, will cook the fish. And if it starts to cook the fish, you will see your fish becoming kind of white, with white spots, dry, and then the acidity kills everything. It kills all the flavors, and then it's like eating cardboard.
Okay.
Sorry.
I'll probably end up doing that.
No, I'm sure you won't.
Poached versus steamed. And you give us detail on both.
Poached versus steamed. Yes. I like both techniques. And if you poach, I recommend that you create a broth that is a bit thick, we call that a velouté. Velouté is like a rich broth. So you take any liquid. In a book we have recipes for liquids that taste good, and you can thicken it with starch, cornstarch, potato starch, flour, and you make it thick. That way, when you cook your fish, the juice of the fish will not have the same consistency of water or a broth that is not thick. If it has the same consistency, the fish juice will go into your broth, and you're losing a lot of the flavor, and you're losing a lot of the moisture of the fish. But if it's cooked in that broth, it basically stays inside. And that changed completely the game. And your fish is delicious, juicy, and very appealing too, because he has this kind of shine on top. So that's poaching.
Yeah.
If you don't want to use the flour or the starch and the water and so on, you have a gentle way to cook as well, which is basically steaming. So steaming has the big advantage of having the seafood not in contact with the liquid, and therefore staying very pure and not you do not alterate the flavors. And steam is fairly gentle. Therefore, by the time the fish is cooked, assuming that you were keeping the fish at room temperature and not out of the fridge right away, in few minutes you will have a delicate kind of skin around the fish that is not too thick and that is not too dry, and the entire fish, when you cut it, is very, very, very moist as well.
Okay. I'm sorry, but it's my interview, so I want to ask you a personal question about the casserole of halibut mushroom. It's baked in the oven, but it's in the steamed section. So is that because you make this unbelievable mushroom mix on the stovetop, and then you put that under the halibut, and then it steams it when you put it in the oven?
Yes. Okay. So what we do, we take mushroom, so different mushroom that we depending of the season. But you can go to the market and whatever inspire you, you bring it back, you cook the mushroom. As soon as you're going to put some salt, you're going to extract some juice from the mushroom, because the salt extract flavors, extract juice all the time. That's one of the quality of the salt. When you will have that juice from the mushroom, then you season your fish and you put it on top of the mushroom and the broth that you have from the mushroom. And it's going to steam because the liquid evaporates slowly. The fish is not completely covered. It's just basically on top. But it's going to be an osmosis in between the mushroom flavor and the earthy flavor. And the fish will capture all that and be cooked very gentle. And it's one of the simplest recipes that you can accomplish. You need one pot, 2 or 3 movements.
I can't wait.
And you're done, and you have something
beautiful.
delicious.
The stews, your fish stews, are holy. And I'm just wondering, what did you learn from fishermen? Someone's asking, how does your relationship with your farmers and purveyors impact your menu? But I know some of your tips you got, from the fishermen for things like the stews. What did you learn?
For sure. Well, from the right fishermen and the right purveyors and fishmongers, you learn how to find the freshest fish. A lot of chefs and consumers do not know when seafood is fresh or not that fresh. Except when you start to cook at home and it stinks, right? And it breaks in a pan and it's fishy and nobody wants to eat it and you're frustrated and embarrassed and they're all mad at you. But it's true. But by going to by interacting with fishmongers, by interacting with the fishermen, they teach you how to recognize fresh fish. Like the eyes should be vibrant when you look at it. They shouldn't be like kind of cloudy. When you open the gills, it should be a bright red, not brown. If the fish has been cleaned and there's no more guts inside, you put your nose on top of the stomach and it should smell like high tide, not low tide.
Yeah.
And it's many other tricks like that actually we are sharing in the book, because a lot of my friends and people that didn't really know how to cook fish were intimidated and again had this bad experience of having a stinky house. And I said we have to give all the tricks that I have learned by interacting with at the source, and all the tricks are in a book actually.
Yes,
and it's an homage to all the fishermen and everybody who have helped me to have that knowledge.
Yeah. Well, one that I loved, you say candy thermometer for fried fish, when you're working with oils and stuff. But everywhere else you say insert a metal prod, and you've got pictures of this, in baked and broiled steamed fish. And when you take this little prod out and you put it on your wrist, if it's warm, it's done?
Yes. So we teach you that too. So we basically teach you from shopping at the store and recognizing when the fish is or the seafood is fresh or not, to seasoning, which is the cover, and then how to apply different techniques that are adequate for every species, since, as you know, tuna is different than codfish, and codfish different than lobster, and lobster different than, and we go on and on and on. And we teach you when the fish is cooked without having any stress and not having something like an exotic gadget at home. So we use a skewer, a metal skewer, and then we go through the flesh of the fish. We insert it for 10 seconds, 15 seconds, and then we take the metal skewer and put it here. For the ones who had babies, when you check the milk, it has to be a little bit hotter than your body temperature. For the ones who don't have babies, it's the same. I don't know. But anyway, it's what we do. That means the fish is medium rare, warm. When it's warm, is medium rare. It has all its qualities and flavor intact. When you insert the skewer, it becomes back cold. it's logic, it's not cooked.
Yeah.
If it comes back too hot and you burn yourself, you're punished for overcooking the fish.
That's amazing that could apply to all fish.
Yes.
To the clams, to the bivalves. We talked. I grew up where there were public beaches, and you would go down and corkscrew. You know, when the tide had gone out, and you just stand there and corkscrew and get the quahogs, and you just open them up, and your dad would chop them up with breadcrumbs and put them back in the shell, and then just put them on a fire.
Delicious.
Oh, just amazing. Or just eat scallops right out of shells. Somebody's asking, if you were going to open a fried clam shack on the Cape, what would be the strategy for Eric's Clam Hut? And please open that.
Well, the strategy will be to get the best ingredients possible, to pay on time, so that way you get the best, to pay the right price and not to bargain, and then to treat the employees with respect, and then you have a good beginning.
And then you can think about what you would do with
Yep.
the clams. Fried on the half shell. I mean, what's your
Well, fried fish, it's delicious. I mean, it's easy also.
You make it look so easy. I love that section because I worry about. I don't like cooking with oil. I mean, I just.
It's obviously richer, and well, if you cook properly with oil, it's not that fatty and oily. It's when you don't have the oil at the right temperature, then suddenly you have something like very heavy and oily, and it's not very healthy, and then you have heartburn later, and so on.
Well, I also think I'm going to burn the house down with.
Oh, I didn't think about that.
Because that would not be your concern. Somebody wants to know, what are the most exciting changes in the restaurant industry or with cooking today? Because the whole book is so simple.
Yes, the book is simple because when you have great ingredients, you have to cook simple. You don't have to complicate. The more you put in a plate, and the more you lose the essence of the main ingredients. So the more you complicate it, the more it's lost. Also, you stress yourself by doing that because you have so many different steps and ingredients. And then if you invite friends at home, you turn your back the entire meal because you're cooking and you're busy and you're stressed, and you communicate the stress to them, and the guests are stressed and everybody's stressed.
I don't know anything about that.
So cooking simple is the right thing to do. Now, what's happening in our industry, it's a constant evolution, of course, and it should be. I see that thanks to technology and information, today we have a lot of information that we didn't have before. So we know what is good for you. We know what is good for the planet. We know what is good for the species, if they are endangered, under stressed, or if they are plentiful. We know who has the good practices. We know a lot of things that we didn't know before. And it's something that is not a trend, but it's really in the mind of everybody today in our industry. It's sustainability. We cannot continue to be irresponsible and not thinking about sustainability. And this is something that applies to seafood in the ocean, but applies to farming practices and so on and so on.
Yeah, we have great sustainability organizations here. Couple more tips. I love the broiler tip. 2 inches from the heat for every half-inch thickness. So 1 inch thick. No, I just blew that.
1 inch is this.
4 inch distance.
Yeah.
Okay. 1 inch thick, 4 inch distance.
Yes.
Okay. And 2 minutes per half-inch thickness.
In general, yes.
Okay. I love that. And just broiling versus grilling.
Well, grilling, the heat comes from the bottom, as you know, and broiling, the heat comes from the top. but it's a very similar technique, except that broiling, the flame never really has come close to the fish that you are cooking. Yeah. But grilling has its own benefits. It has a little bit of a smoky flavor coming from the grill itself and the flames, if you have a little bit of flames underneath. Broiling, you don't have that, but it's a very efficient way to cook and a quick way to cook. I did a series many years ago called, I don't remember now, but anyway, it was about cooking in your toaster oven.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, the series was called Get Toasted. And we did... It's true. 12 episodes. You can find it on YouTube. 12 episodes, 3 minutes per episode, and you can broil in your toaster oven a piece of many pieces of seafood or anything you want, and have amazing results. So broiling, it's a very easy technique.
All of it.
For beginners, it's fantastic.
All of it is so simple and so beautiful. We have to. I could stay here and try to plumb your thoughts all night, but we probably shouldn't. But one last question from someone in the audience. What do you like to eat that might surprise us? What's something that you would sit down maybe after a late night, standing at the refrigerator, not that anyone does that, and eats right out of the refrigerator, but what's something that we might be surprised by?
So I go to bed, I don't eat before I go to bed.
Smart.
But then at 1 o'clock I wake up. And then I have some chorizo and camembert. And it's a little party in the kitchen.
Is that a confessional? Because that is nothing.
It's not a confession because I don't have any guilty trip about it.
I wish that I had those things in my refrigerator to eat at 1 o'clock in the morning. It's more like dry cereal, dry. Eric Ripert, thank you so much. So much information.
Thank you.
So much pleasure you've given people. Thank you. Thank you.
Eric Ripert and Robin Young, the cookbook is stunning, and so are the two of you. Can we please give them another round of applause? I want to say this. It is such a delight to have you in CitySpace, and I will never forget the advice that your seafood should smell like high tide and not low tide. Robin, this was probably one of my favorite conversations in CitySpace of all time. You did a magnificent job. The real test of Robin will be how she takes this hour-long conversation and edits it down for 11 minutes on Here and Now. Look out for that. I confess that I'm actually starving after listening to that conversation. And I want to thank all of you for taking time out of your busy lives to be here. I bet you're starving too. I'm happy to report once again that there is fish soup awaiting you. You can begin to smell it. And Chef Ripert's book, Seafood Simple, is awaiting you in the hall. You can purchase them, and they are all signed. Thank you all. Thank both of you. Have a great night.